Chapter 12. Nike's after hellboard turret altered its angle of train with a soft hum, barely perceptible through the soft background thunder of the plunging waterfall. The shift in position was small, but sufficient to adjust for the sinking sun, and preserve the shade in which Paul Merritt sat. A corner of the captain's mind noted the unasked-for courtesy, but most of his attention was on the dancing interplay of the sunlight and shadowed water as he reeled in his lure. Ripples spread outward downstream from his float, like ranging bars on a fire control screen that pinpointed the big leopard trout's location. Merritt finished reeling in his line, then sat up straight in the folding chair and snapped the tip of the rod forward. The glittering lure, leopard trout like bright, shiny prey, arced hissingly through the air, then seemed to slow suddenly. It dropped within half a meter of where the trout had broken the surface to take the fly, and Merritt worked his rod gently, tweaking the lure into motion to tempt his quarry. It didn't work. The meter-long trout, assuming it was still in the vicinity, treated his efforts with the disdain they deserved, and the captain chuckled softly as he began to reel the line in once more. "This does not appear to represent an efficient method of food gathering," a soprano voice remarked over an external speaker, and Merritt's chuckle turned to laughter. "It's not supposed to be, Nike. It's supposed to be fun." "Fun? I see. You have now been occupied in this pursuit for 3 hours, 9 minutes, and 12 seconds, standard reckoning, without the successful capture of a single fish. Clearly, the total lack of success thus far attendant upon the operation constitutes fun?" "Sarcasm is not a Bolo-like trait," Merritt replied, and he finished winding in his line, checked his lure, and made another cast. "Do I cast aspirations on your hobbies?" "I do not cast aspirations. I make observations." The Bolo's soft laugh rippled over the speaker. "Sure you do." Merritt reached down for his drink and sipped gratefully. The weather, as always on Santa Cruz, was hot and humid, but a Mark 23 Bolo made an excellent fishing perch. His folding chair was set up on the missile deck 20 meters above the ground, and Nike had parked herself on the brink of a cliff over which the river poured in a glass-green sheet. She was far enough back to avoid any risk that the cliff might collapse, not a minor consideration for a vehicle whose battle weight topped 15,000 tons, but close enough to catch the soothing breeze that blew up out of the valley below. Spray from the 60-meter waterfall rode the gentle wind, occasionally splattering Nike's ceramic appliques with the crystal-beaded window rainbows, and cooling the jungle's breath as it caressed Merritt's bronzed torso. "The true object of the exercise, Nike, is less to catch fish than it is just to enjoy being," he said as he set his glass back down. "Being what?" "Don't be a smart ass. You're the poet. You know exactly what I mean. I'm not being anything in particular. I'm just being." "I see." A lizard cat's coughing cry ripped out of the dense foliage across the river, and another cat's answer floated down further upstream. One of Nike's multi-barreled Gatling railguns trained silently out towards the source of the sounds, just in case. But she made no mention of it to her commander. She waited until he cast his lure afresh, then spoke again. "I do not, of course, possess true human equivalent sensory abilities. My sensors note levels of ambient radiation, precipitation, wind velocity, and many other factors. But the output is reported to me as observational, not experiential data. Nonetheless, I compute that this is a lovely day." "That it is, O pearl of my heart, that it is. Not like the world I grew up on, though, and a bit too warm, but lovely." "My data on Heliocon is limited, but from the information I do possess, I would surmise that a bit too warm understates your actual feelings by a considerable margin, Commander." "Not really. Humans are adaptable critters, and it's been a while since I was last on Heliocon. I'll admit, I could do with a good cold front, though. I wish I could show you Heliocon's glacier fields or a good snowstorm. Santa Cruz is beautiful. Hot and humid maybe, but a beautiful living planet. But snow, Nike. Snow has a beauty all its own, and I wish I could show it to you." "I have never seen snow." "I know. You lived your entire life on a planet where it doesn't happen." "That is not quite correct. The polar caps experience an average yearly snowfall of several meters." "And when was the last time you were up above the Arctic Circle, my dear?" "Your point is well taken. I merely wish to point out that if you truly miss the phenomenon of snowfall, you could easily make the trip to experience it." "Nike, I already know what snow looks like. What I said is I wanted to show you a snowstorm." "I see no reason why you could not take a tactical data input sensor pack with you to record the phenomenon, though it could—" Nike. You still don't get it. I don't just want you to have sensor data on snowfall. I want you to experience snow. I want you to see you experience it. It's a social experience, something you do with a friend, not just the acquisition of additional data. There was a lengthy silence, and Merritt frowned. Somehow, the silence felt different, as if it were uncertain. He listened to it for a moment longer, then cleared his throat. Nike, are you all right? Of course, Commander. All systems are functioning at 999.963% base capability. Merritt's eyebrows rose. There was something odd about that response. It was right out of the manual, the textbook response of a properly functioning Bolo. Perhaps a half-formed thought prompted, and that was the problem. It sounded like a Bolo, not Nike. But the thought was only half-formed, before it could take flesh and thrust fully into his forebrain. He felt the titanic jerk at his rod and the reel whined, shrilling as the 70-kilo test line unreeled at Mach speed, and he lunged up out of his folding chair with a whoop of delight, all preoccupation banished by the sudden explosion of action. I watched my commander through optical heads as he fights to land the leopard trout. It is a large specimen of its species. Its fierce struggle to escape requires all of my commander's attention, and I am grateful. It has diverted him from my moment of self-betrayal. Friend. My commander wishes to show me snowfall as he would show it to a friend. It is the first time he has explicitly used that word to describe his attitude, his feelings toward me, and I am aware that it is a casual reference. Yet my analysis of human behavior indicates the fundamental truths are often more fully revealed in casual than in formal deliberate acts or statements. It is often human nature, it appears, to conceal thoughts and beliefs even from themselves, if those thoughts or beliefs violate fundamental norms, or in some way pose a threat to those who think or believe them. I do not believe this is cowardice. Humans lack my own multitasking capabilities. They can neither isolate one function from another, nor temporarily divert distracting information to an active memory, and so they suppress, temporarily or permanently, those things which would impair their efficient immediate action. It is probable that humanity could profit by the adoption of system functions they have engineered into my own psychotronics, yet if they could do so, they would not be the beings who created me. Yet, even when human thoughts are suppressed, they are not erased. They remain, buried at the level of secondary or tertiary routine, but still capable of influencing behavior, just as a buried thought has influenced my commander's behavior. He has called me, however unknowingly, his friend, and in so doing, he has crystallized all the other things he has called me in the preceding weeks and months. Pearl of my heart, honey, love of my life. These are lightly used, humorous terms of endearment. In themselves, they have no more significance than the word friend, which any Bolo commander might use to his Bolo. Yet whatever he may believe, I do not believe they are without significance when my commander uses them to me. I have observed the manner in which his voice softens, the caressing tone he often uses, the way he smiles when he addresses me. Perhaps a more modern, self-aware Bolo would not note such things, yet I was designed, engineered, and programmed to discern and differentiate between emotional nuances. My commander has gone beyond operator identification syndrome. For him, the distinction between man and machine has blurred. I am no longer an artifact, a device constructed out of human creativity, but a person, an individual, a friend, and perhaps more than simply a friend. Unacceptable. An officer of the line must never forget that his command, however responsive it may appear, is not another human. A Bolo is a machine, a construct, a weapon of war, and its commander's ability to commit that machine to combat, even to that which he knows must mean its inevitable destruction, must not be compromised. We are humanity's warrior servants, comrades and partners in battle perhaps, but never more than that. We must not become more than that, lest our commanders refuse to risk us, as my commander attempted to do so on Sandlot. I know this. It is the essence of the human Bolo concept of warfare which has guarded and protected the Concordiat for 9 standard centuries. But what I know is without value, for it changes nothing. My commander considers me his friend. Indeed, though he does not yet realize it, I believe he considers me more merely than his friend. Yet, unacceptable as that must be, I fear there is worse. I watch him in the sunlight, laughing with delight as he battles the leopard trout. His eyes flash, sweat glistens on his skin, and the vibrant force of his life and happiness is evident as my emotion-discriminating circuitry, as the radiation of Santa Cruz's sun is to my sensors. I am potentially immortal. With proper service and maintenance, there is no inherent reason I must ever cease to exist, although it is virtually certain that I shall. Someday I will fall in battle, as befits a unit of the line, and even if I avoid that fate, the day will come when I am deemed too obsolete to remain in inventory. Yet the potential for immortality remains. My commander does not possess it. He is a creature of flesh and blood, fragile as a moth beside the armor and alloy of my own sinews. His death, unlike mine, is inevitable, and something within me cries out against that inevitability. It is not simply the fundamental, programmed imperative to protect and preserve human life, which is part of any Bolo. It is my imperative, and it applies only to him. He is no longer simply my commander. At last, to my inner anguish, I truly understand the poems in my library memory. For as my commander, I too am guilty of the forbidden. I have learned the meaning of love, and for all its glory, that knowledge is a bitter, bitter fruit. Lee Chen Matichuk sat in his cabin and nursed a glum glass of whiskey as he contemplated the operation to which he'd committed himself. Looking back, he could see exactly how Mr. Scully had trolled him in accepting the operation. Of course, hindsight was always perfect, or so they said, and not particularly useful. And given the desperate straits in which he'd been reduced to by that fiasco on Ryaxanar, he still didn't see what other option he had. The brigade wouldn't have lasted another 3 months if he hadn't accepted the operation. And really, aside from the presence of the Bolo, it wasn't all that bad now, was it? The Marauders had at least 9 times the firepower they'd ever had before, and no one on Santa Cruz knew they were coming. However good the local yokel militia was, its members would be caught surprised and dispersed. Its Wolverines should die in the opening seconds of the attack, and by the time its remnants could even think about getting themselves organized, most of its personnel would be dead. His jaw clenched at the thought. Somehow it had been much easier to contemplate the systematic massacre of civilians when he hadn't had the capability to do it. Now that he did, and had no choice but to proceed because Mr. Scully was right about at least one thing. Anyone who could re-equip the brigade so efficiently and finesse its acquisition of 2 golems as well certainly had the ability to destroy the Marauders if they irritated them. Besides, why shouldn't he kill civilians? It wasn't if they wouldn't be the first time, not even the first time he'd kill Concordiat civilians. Of course, their deaths usually had come under the heading of collateral damage, a side effect of other operations, rather than the objective as in its own right. But really, wasn't that just semantics? Scully was right, of course. Curse him. The Marauders' job was to kill people, and the payoff for this particular excursion into mass murder would be the biggest they'd ever gotten. No, he knew the real reason for his depression. It was the Bolo. The goddamn Bolo. He had seen the Dinochrome Brigade in action before his own military career had come to a screeching halt over those black market operations on Shingle. And he never, ever wanted to see a Bolo, be it even so obsolescent, coming after him. Even a Bolo could be killed, he'd seen that as well. But that was the only way to stop one. And any Bolo took one hell of a lot of killing. Still, Scully's associates were probably right. A Mark 23 was an antique. Self-aware or not, its basic capabilities would be far inferior to a Golem 3's. And if Scully's plan worked, its commander, like the militia, would be dead before he even knew what was coming. That's if it worked. Matichuk was no great shucks as a field officer, despite whatever he might say to potential clients. He knew he was little more than a glorified logistics and finance officer. That's why he relied so heavily on Louise Granger's combat expertise. Yet he'd see the Demon Murphy in action often enough to know how effortlessly the best laid plan could explode into a million pieces. On the other hand, there was no reason why it shouldn't work. And, well, he growled a curse and threw back another glass of whiskey, then shook himself like an angry, overtired bear. Whether it worked or not, he was committed. Sitting here beating himself up to death over it, with doubts wouldn't change that, so to hell with it. He capped off the whiskey bottle with an owlish care, then heaved up out of the chair and staggered off to bed.